start up. It's Jack. Good to see you, Jack. Jack, can you name the artist? Hey, there's Christina.
Hi, Christina.
All right. We'll wait for a few more people to come on, and then we're going to introduce our guest. This was a big get. Brittany Packnett Cunningham is going to join us, and I'll introduce her in just a second, but we'll let you all come on, and we'll let Midnight Rambler by the Rolling Stones. That's the answer, Jack. Rolling Stones, Midnight Rambler.
I wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know? And you know that we have a very important guest when Amy comes down to the basement. And
you've had a lot of really important guests.
yeah,
Brittany is just one of my all-time favorites. So
I think the only other guest that you come down for is Dr. Gilman.
Yeah.
Who we met thanks to Christina. So, thanks, Jack. I was wearing this hat playing basketball with the boys out front, and Amy's said you got to keep that hat on. She likes that. She likes that hat.
I think you look super cute in the backwards hat. It reminds me of when we first met.
No, Jack did not say the monkeys, did he? No. There's Jacqueline. Oh no. Couple of things we want you all to know about, and then we're going to bring Brittany on. First is, this is the first day that Texas has quote unquote reopened. And reopening is in the actions of the beholder. So if you stayed at home as we have stayed at home today, then Texas has not reopened for you. But if you are unlucky enough to work for a retail establishment, a movie theater, a restaurant that has chosen to open its doors, and you don't want to go out because you fear that you risk infecting yourself and your family and those with whom you will come in touch over the coming days, then you did have to participate in the reopening of Texas. And what is kind of a mystery to many of us is yesterday Texas recorded its highest number of daily deaths from COVID-19 and one of the highest daily infection rates from COVID-19. We've still tested fewer people per capita than almost any other state in the union. And yet it was deemed wise by our governor and our state's leadership to open up the state and put at risk those frontline workers who in many instances are going to be working for $7.25 an hour. I may have told you all in a previous show, but Amy and I were walking Artemis a couple nights ago. And I don't know if you remember this, but one of our neighbors is a bartender at a restaurant downtown, and he said that he'd just gotten the order or the request from his boss to come down and work. And we asked him how he felt about it. And he said, you know what, I'm not comfortable going in, that we don't have enough testing. This thing is still spreading. The death rate and the infection rates are still going up. And his wife said, no, I don't think you're going into work tomorrow. The fucked up thing is if he chooses not to go into work and his employer reports him, he will not be eligible for unemployment benefits in Texas, at least as I read the current policies and practices of our state. So, tell me how you all feel. This does not seem to make a ton of sense. So for those who can in Texas, stay home. Please stay home. For those who are on the front lines in healthcare, in grocery stores, in food kitchens, first responders, police, and fire, God bless you. Thank you for what you're doing. Stay safe. And if all of us really want to have your back, then we're going to stay at home and not put you at any further risk than you already are. Last thing that I want to bring to your attention, and I'm going to ask Brittany about this, but keep an eye on this development of well-armed white men with AR-15s and AK-47s, which were designed to kill people very efficiently and very quickly and in very great numbers, storming the state capitals in different states throughout the country. Now, not every state capital, but we're certainly seeing it in Michigan, those chilling, disturbing, really messed up images and video of people with guns yelling at police officers, congregating not at 6 feet distance, not even 6-inch distance, and essentially threatening lawmakers with violence should they not vote or decide in the way that those armed white gunmen want them to. And it begs the question, and some of you have asked this question, how is that not terrorism? the threat of force or violence to achieve a political aim outside of the ballot box, outside of peaceful democratic protests, certainly smacks of terrorism. And you don't have to kill somebody to use terror to try to intimidate them or influence the direction that this country or your state or your governor takes. That's what's going on in America. You wonder why I'm so passionate about ending the sale of assault weapons in this country and buying back every single AK-47 and AR-15. It's because they're used against too many people in this country, and the threat of using them exists every time some jackass shows up at the state capitol or to a protest to try to scare and intimidate and frighten people. Those weapons have no place in our lives. That's it.
Just banned in Canada.
And they were just, thank you, Justin Trudeau, for, through executive order, having the political will and the guts to do the right thing. Wish that we had more of that right now in this country. We will get it over time, and there are a lot of people who are working on this, just not enough of them are in positions of power or public trust yet. Okay, Amy, I want you to help me introduce Brittany, because you know her as well as I do. We both probably became aware of her in 2014 after Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri. She helped to lead the protest, but even more importantly, she helped to bridge some of the divide and clear up a lot of the misinformation that was being put out, perhaps by the police department or the city in Ferguson, made sure that the American public got the true story of what had happened. This is something that she has continued to work on. President Obama had cited her work, and in fact, President Obama put her to work on addressing this issue and trying to come up with some national policies. She has this fabulous TED Talk that I think I sent to you last year on confidence, that I really appreciated. Here I was, a candidate for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, and I watched her talk on this TED Talk about confidence, and it really resonated and struck home. She is a commentator or analyst or very wise person on NBC and MSNBC, and has also just become a good friend and somebody who I turn to for advice, just because she is so wise beyond her years. She's been good to both of us. We've had meals together, and we check in from time to time. And I was telling Amy that this is going to probably be our last Instagram Live for a little while. I don't know, for a couple of days, for a week, who knows? And she said, you got to get somebody amazing. And I said, well, who could we get? And your first suggestion was Brittany.
Yeah. Well, because Brittany was so sweet. She reached out to us yesterday and she said, hey, I'm just thinking about you, checking in. And as soon as she sent us that text, I was like, Beto has got to get her on the show.
Yeah, so Brittany, that's where it came from. It came from Amy and me being your biggest fans and wanting to know how you're doing and wanting to see you again. And we have the ability to do this through live stream. So, hey!
Hey! What's up, friends? How are you?
Good.
We are good. We just completed another week of the O'Rourke Homeschool for the Gifted, where our 7th grader, 6th grader, who basically can take care of themselves, or I should say their amazing public school teachers are helping them get through their classes, leaves us with our 9-year-old who's in 3rd grade. Amy oversees science and math. I do kind of language arts and music, and a little bit of basketball at the end of the day. But we are all good, thank God.
That's so good.
Doing our best. Tell us how you're doing.
I'm doing great. My husband of 6 months plus like a week is downstairs trying to figure out our router situation. So, this newlywed and quarantine life, as we've been calling it, is not what we expected, but it has actually been really wonderful in very unexpected ways. We've been learning a lot about each other, obviously spending a lot of time together. But I mean, both of us are on the road all the time under normal circumstances. So it's been nice to just be able to relax, cook meals together. I beat him in a lot of games of Uno. And he's going to tell you that he beats me, but don't believe him. I'm the one who wins the Uno games. But it's been as joyful as it could possibly be during this time. But I am, just like you, every single day working to try to make sure that this crisis, this pandemic, is not even more exacerbated for people than it has to be. Every single day is a new adventure, but I'm like I'm grateful for my friends and my family and this community that we continue to build, and making sure that we check in on one another, even though it has to be virtually. And I'm so happy to talk to you all. I haven't seen you in so long. I feel like I went from talking to you all like every week to just not seeing you because life changed.
Isn't it kind of ironic or counterintuitive that we have become closer in quarantine? Like Amy and I feel like have become closer, and we have our moments where certainly I get on Amy's nerves, and we'll want our space from one another. But if you'd asked me ahead of this, like you're going to spend 5 weeks in the same house, and you all will not leave, and you'll spend every waking moment together, I would have told you we would have been absolutely sick of each other at this point. We've been married for 14 years. You all have only been married for 6 months. So this is a real trial and test for your relationship. And you're telling us you all are coming through with flying colors.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting closer. We started kind of newlywed therapy right at the top of the year. And we had a video chat with our therapist 2 days ago, and she was like, well, we can check in like a month or two, but you all are ready to. I was like, we're graduating from therapy. It's a miracle. Because we just wanted to set a really strong foundation from the beginning, and life was moving too quickly to do premarital counseling like we wanted. So we started right at the beginning of our marriage. So yeah, we're thankfully coming out of this closer, but space is a really important thing right now. We moved right after we got married to a bigger spot, and I'm really glad that we did, because if we didn't have like time and space to spend away from each other and do our own thing and get our rest or do our work or whatever, I think this would be a lot more difficult. But yeah, we are coming through this, and I feel like if we can get through this and still be good and still not only love each other but like each other, then we will we will be ready for anything that life could throw at us.
And remind us where you are right now. What city are you in?
So I am in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. I'm a native of St. Louis, but this is my second time living in D.C. I started my career off here in D.C. in 2007 as a teacher, then went on and did work on Capitol Hill, moved back home to St. Louis to lead an ed nonprofit. And then, as you were talking about earlier, in 2014, all of our lives changed when Michael Brown was killed. And a lot of the activism that I was raised doing became an even more important part of my life. And so I was back home from 2012 to 2017, and then moved back because work took me back out to the East Coast. So I've been back here in DC, Northeast DC specifically, since then.
Let me ask you a question. I mentioned earlier that the first time I really heard of you and began following you was in 2014. I then got to see you in Austin with the Pod Save guys, where you absolutely blew my mind. You absolutely had that audience in Austin in the palm of your hand. You were talking about some of the weightiest, toughest, thorniest issues in American civic life today. But you did it with humor and wit and intelligence, and people were laughing, but they were also like, the stuff was hitting home, and it was just so impressed me, your ability to connect the dots on important issues. But if we go back to 2014 and we think about police violence and police violence against unarmed Black men, and too often Black women, and sometimes Black children, what do you think about now in 2020, when not only have we failed to fully address and resolve that challenge, but we have white men with weapons of war storming the Capitol in Michigan, Lansing, right up against the face of those police officers with those weapons that they have? How do you process, how can you help me process that? I'm having such a hard time with the anger and frustration I feel when I see those images, and what I fear it will lead to in this country, and the disconnect between how Black Americans are treated with weapons or not having weapons, and how white Americans are treated with weapons. Give me your thoughts.
Okay. So I'm going to answer your question, but first, back to that night in Austin, I was like, who is this guy everybody keeps talking about? Like, people are so freaking excited to come to this live show, and I'm like, who is this Beto? And I remember sitting backstage and watching your interview, and I think I've shared this with you guys. Like, I had that moment that I imagined what it must have felt like the first time somebody heard RFK speak. And I remember being really impressed and almost taken aback by your transparency, and your like your deep care for people just came through so much. I was telling Reggie earlier, I was like, he's almost too honest to be a politician. Like, I was like
that might be true.
It did get us into trouble sometimes.
Right, he's got like too much integrity for this world in some ways.
Oh.
And then I met Amy, and I was like, okay, well, you all are the perfect match, because I keep meeting these really incredible, thoughtful, powerful men who then somehow manage to marry up, and like you and Amy are another case of that. So I'm just really appreciative for how you all are keeping these conversations going and continuing to move forward everybody's mindsets on the things that matter. So to your question, what I saw in Michigan yesterday, and what we've also been seeing in places like Wisconsin and other places, was frustrating but not surprising. And I'll never forget being on the streets in Ferguson, and the conversations that we were having among our activist family were really about how much we recognize that the most threatening weapon, you know, through the lens of our opposition, the most threatening weapon that we were in possession of were not guns, was not lethal weapons. It was our skin color, right? That blackness in and of itself is treated like a weapon in this country. And when you look at the image and the videos from the Michigan State Capitol yesterday, you are reminded that not only is blackness treated like a weapon, but that whiteness is a shield no matter what you do. So a lot of people who wanted to defend the folks who were in the Michigan State Capitol yesterday have been bringing up the Black Panthers. And they've been doing so in a way that is both ahistorical and disingenuous. But what the truth is that in 1967, about 30 members of the Black Panther Party were decided that it was time to educate Black people around the country on their right to bear arms, right? That irrespective of whether or not you agree with 2A or not, that they wanted to make sure that it was being enforced equitably across races. So they went into in California, they went into a government building and they were armed. But if you know the history of the Panthers and the practice of the Panthers, they were highly disciplined, right? So there was no yelling, there was no screaming, there was no storming of stuff like we saw yesterday in the video. There were 30 people who were incredibly disciplined. And what happened was that the Mumford Act was passed very shortly thereafter, and Ronald Reagan, a conservative governor at the time, passed one of the most restrictive gun control laws in the entire country that was having trouble getting steam before the Black Panthers demonstrated, but afterwards, as soon as we saw Black people with guns, suddenly they were able to pass the law, no questions asked. So that is the actual comparative history that people keep wanting to bring up. The truth of the matter is what you and I know to be true already, right? That a Black person only has to be armed with the skin that we live in to be treated as a threat in this society. But if a white man goes into a government building fully armed, we are calling him not a thug, but a patriot. And I am almost glad in some ways that the extreme example that people saw yesterday is being spoken about in a better context. Because had that happened before August 9th, 2014, when we were having a nationwide conversation about this, I don't think people would have thought about it the same way. I don't think as many people would have questioned it. I don't think as many people would have recognized the hypocrisy that was happening in real time live on television the way that they are now. And so if nothing else, the movement over the last 5 or 6 years has helped shift American mindsets and opened up people to understand that the experience that you are living is very different from the perspective that other people have. We see cases right now where Black men literally are getting accosted by police walking into Walmart with masks on, which are being recommended by the CDC. If a Black man can't even wear a mask to go buy some eggs for his family, you best believe none of us can go into a state capitol fully armed and screaming at government officials. So I'm frustrated, but I'm not surprised. And at the very least, I am glad that the national conversation we're having about it is far more honest than the one we would have had just a couple of years ago.
What do you think, related question, what do you think about this idea that for many white Americans, this great pandemic has been a great revealer of inequality and inequity that has existed for as long as we have been a country? And borne out some of the numbers we see from Chicago, where African Americans represent 29, 30% of the population, 70% of those who died, very similar numbers in Louisiana and other states where it can be measured. You have our lieutenant governor in Texas, Dan Patrick, said there are more important things than living. In other words, open the state, and so what if people die? Not acknowledging that the people who are dying by and large are the working poor, are people who, have to go to work and earn $7.25 an hour to keep their families going. And disproportionately, they are African Americans in this country. So you mentioned earlier all the work that has gone on since 2014 on this issue that helps us become more aware to the irony, the perverse irony of those protesters in Lansing, Michigan. Do you think something good can come out of this in what has been revealed about how unequal the effect of coronavirus has been in the United States? And will that prompt change that you have been fighting for, that we all should be fighting for?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is I hope so. I pray so. We're all working for it to be so. It's interesting, though, because a couple of thoughts come to mind when you ask that question. First of all, I think I'm glad that we're finally having a more nuanced conversation, because when this all started, people kind of kept saying, well, now we all know how it feels to be in trouble, to be at risk. I've been reminding people that we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat, right? And that there are some folks who have far more access, far more privilege, far more resources to endure this storm that we are all facing than other folks, right? Some people are in a yacht and some people are in a dinghy with a hole at the bottom. But what also happens is we see, even as a more nuanced conversation is happening, that the kind of blame the victim mentality is soon to follow, right? So the conversation we've been having about why Black people are so at risk is in part because of the inequities that we face around employment, because there is a larger proportion of our community that are deemed essential workers, who are in jobs that often are not paying a living wage. Far more of our people are subject to being on unemployment or not having the kind of health care that they need should they become COVID positive. But the other piece is about the prevalence of comorbidities in our community. So we have higher incidences of cancer, diabetes, respiratory illnesses like asthma and other things that make COVID-19 more deadly. This is a truth. This is a truth because of things like environmental racism, such that kids in our communities are coming up with asthma more. This is a truth because of food deserts, such that our folks have less access to good nutrition. There are a whole lot of reasons that are deeply systemic as to why those comorbidities exist in the way that they do in our community. But some people who never desired the facts, but only desired to lay blame, have seen those comorbidities and said, well, you want me to stop being so lazy. You need to work out more. You need to eat better. You need to stop smoking. You need to do whatever. The truth of the matter is we're not doing any of those things more proportionally than any other community, but we're being blamed for them much more. So I worry that when people have this conversation and they don't do it with the level of nuance, then we see people use the truth and pervert it and weaponize it in a different way. And so that leaves me worried about how much we'll actually be able to see good come out of this from kind of mainstream places. But what I will say is that I think especially among allies and what I call co-conspirators, right? People who are really ready to take the risk so much so that they're ready to plan the danger with you in the first place, as well as leaders within communities of color, are really taking the time to provide the research, share the resources, share the support that we need in our communities. So I did some background work with Black Entertainment fantastic telethon last week, raising over $16 million specifically for Black communities in 6 of the hardest hit cities, right? So we're seeing money go directly to the Black folks that are suffering most, not only from the disease, but from the larger crisis. Places like New Orleans, right, where there's a Black woman mayor, and Mayor Cantrell said would certainly disagree with your lieutenant governor in Texas, because she reminded us there is no economy without public health. You cannot talk about the health of the economy without talking about the health of the people that keep the economy running. And I think that there are so many ways in which people take for granted who is keeping the economy running. Who are we asking to go back to work? Who are we asking to deliver these packages? Who are we asking to deliver these meals and these groceries with no hazard pay, with no living wages, with no sick leave, with no support? the people that we are asking to do that are people of color. It's Black folks, it's brown folks, it's immigrants, it's indigenous people, it's people with disabilities. It's the folks who stand at the greatest risk every single day when they're delivering that package. And some of us are just thinking about the next time we can go get a haircut, right? So we have to shift our mindset to recognize that this calls for collective power. That if I am only doing well if you are doing well, if my neighbors are doing well, if my elderly neighbor is doing as well as my 30-year-old neighbor, if my physically able neighbor is doing as well as my disabled neighbor, if my white neighbors are doing as well as my Black neighbors. We literally do not get through this if we don't get through it together, because this is just as much about what we expose one another to as it is about how much we keep ourselves safe. So I'm hoping that that mentality continues to kind of pervade the conversations that we're having with one another, because we're not going to get out of this thing unless we can all get on the same page.
And it's got to be reflected in the choices that we make in November, right? I mean, if we come to a new understanding or awareness, if the problems which have been borne by so many but are laid bare for all, or anyone who has eyes to see it, are not then acted upon, and choosing leaders who will take the actions necessary to repair the damage done, increase the wages that are at $7.25 in Texas, improve access to health care for all, address the environmental racism that we see that produces the asthma levels and the heart disease and many of the comorbidities that you talked about, then all for naught, right? And here's the concern I want to raise with you and get your feedback. So we witnessed what happened in Wisconsin, and how wonderful that despite a very cynical ploy to depress voter turnout, people were still willing to vote. And they ended up electing a Democrat, perhaps against the odds. How awful that we know that at least 40 people have COVID-19 as a result of having to vote in person. Texas, our Attorney General is saying that unless you are over the age of 65, unless you have a physical disability, unless you're out of the country, you cannot request a mail-in ballot. And he's publicly threatening persecution and prosecution should you do that. You know this because we've talked about it. Texas is one of the most racially gerrymandered and voter suppressed states in the union. Tell us how you're thinking about whether it's Wisconsin or Texas or Georgia, where Governor Kemp opened up that state a week ago, and we're seeing 1,000 cases just yesterday in Georgia. How do we politically meet this moment? You and I are connecting over Instagram Live. Soon enough, in order to be able to vote, it's going to have to transcend this. What are your thoughts? What are you doing and working on? What are you seeing that inspires you that others are working on?
So a couple of things. Voting by mail should have already been the widespread option for every single citizen in this country, right? We know that it is effective. We know that it increases turnout. We know that many, many, many more people will have access to the ballot box if not only do they have the option to vote by mail, but if they are sent a prepackaged and with postage prepaid ballot that they can simply fill out and send back like they do in California and some other places, right? So this is something that we should be fighting for all the time, not just now. But as you said, we are experiencing the false choice that is being presented to us. So I think the first thing we need to do is every single time we hear a politician or elected official try to sell us on this false choice, that it's either your vote or your health, that it's either democracy or our well-being, that you tell them clearly and unapologetically that you reject that false choice. Just like it's a false choice between the economy and our health, it is a false choice between our vote and our health. We can vote and remain healthy. There are ways that systems can adjust to make sure that this happens, and they need to be starting now. They need to have started yesterday, last year. But this idea that we only have one of two choices is false, and elected officials need to hear very clearly from us that we are not buying that, right? The second thing we need to do is we need to try to influence the people that we have influence over. You know, I think a lot of people think influence is about, can you sell a t-shirt on Instagram? How many followers do you have? What's your engagement like? All of us have influence and power over somebody. It might be your family members. It may be kids that you teach and their families. It may be the folks from down the block. It may be the folks at your house of worship. Wherever it is, you exert influence. And the thing that you can do is you can send a text message right now to 10 people, and you can say, go check your voter registration at vote.org. If you're not registered, you can get registered on the same website. If you are registered, you can go ahead and request your absentee ballot now. We need to go ahead and be prepared for this now. If our states aren't going to get prepared, if the federal government isn't going to get prepared, then we got to get prepared. And we got to make sure everyone under the sound of our voice, as my preacher daddy would say, is getting ready too. And so that's honestly what I'm working on right now, is I'm partnering with a lot of civil rights organizations, Color of Change and their Voting While Black initiative, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, the NAACP Legal and Educational Defense Fund, and other folks to figure out how we get that message out to the most people possible, how we demystify the process, because voting is already so confusing in so many places. Now we're adding another ask on top of it. We want to make sure that people can understand exactly what they're going for, and just trying to make sure that the support people need to be able to exercise their right to vote, advocate at the state and federal level, and cast their ballot is felt widespread. So somebody in the comments just said, can you repeat that? Here you go. Tell 10 people to visit vote.org, vote.org. Check your registration, because sometimes they push people off the roll. So check your registration. If you're not registered, you can get registered on that website. If you are registered, you can request your absentee ballot on that website. You click the link for your state and it will take you to all of the things that you need to do to get your absentee ballot. Vote.org is the place you need to be.
You know what? I just mentioned that Governor Kemp in Georgia reopened the state prematurely. There is 1,000, what I read online today, 1,000 new COVID-19 cases in that state. Mm-hmm. If we take Brittany's point to heart, and we think about the fact that when he was Secretary of State, Kemp purged hundreds of thousands of names from the voter roll because people who didn't know any better, because I wouldn't have known any better, didn't know that they needed to go to vote.org and make sure that their registration was current and up to date at their current location. They were purged, unable to vote and elect Stacey Abrams, who would be the governor right now, for that very cynical voter suppression ploy employed by Kemp, as it is by, unfortunately, by Republicans throughout this country. So I'm so glad you said that, because some folks may think, look, we're only in May. This election doesn't start heating up until October. I'll think about it then. No, think about it now, because if you do not check your voter registration and ask those 10 friends and family members to do the same, there may not be an election for us to win if we don't have the voters in the game. Brittany, we're going to let you go. Go ahead.
Trump said in no uncertain terms that if everybody gets access to the ballot box, Republicans won't win. They know that the numbers are against them. That is why we see widespread gerrymandering. That is why we see machines that don't work in primarily Black and brown communities. That is why we see the disenfranchisement of formerly incarcerated people, because those people are disproportionately people of color. If our vote didn't count for anything, people wouldn't be working so hard to steal it. So at the end of the day, they know what the threat is if we turn out in real numbers. And the way that we might have to turn out in November is by mail. So like you said, go ahead and get ready for that right now.
I love it. We're going to let you go, but I read that you have a book coming out soon. Do you want to tell us when we'll be able to read it?
Sure. It'll be next year. So this is an early preview, but it's called We Are Like Those Who Dream. And over the last 4 years or so, I've been collecting speeches by Black women throughout history just for my own kind of salvation. They've been a salve for me. They've given me inspiration when I felt too tired to keep going. They've given me clarity when I was trying to figure out what the right strategy was. And so I'm bringing some of those speeches to life in this book, accompanied by some essays of reflection on this moment and others from me. So yeah, it'll be out early in 2021, and I'm giving my editor edits this weekend. So yeah, definitely look out for that. Thanks for sharing.
That's awesome.
You have 2 proofreaders in Texas if you need them, okay?
Yes, okay. I definitely need it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's good to see your faces.
Totally, you too. So last question. Beto and I are going to let the kids watch a movie downstairs, and we're going to watch a movie upstairs. What should we watch? What have you all been watching?
Oh, that's so good. We've been getting into Ozark, which is very intense as a show.
Yeah.
You know what's a really good film? It's called Uncorked. It's on Netflix. It stars Courtney B. Vance, Niecy Nash, some other folks. It was written by Prentice Penny, who's the head writer on HBO's Insecure. But it is about this Black young man in Memphis whose family owns like the best barbecue joint in town, but he doesn't want to go into the family business because he wants to become a sommelier. So it's all about his adventures being like one of the only Black faces in that world. It is really special. It is very funny. It is really touching. I like didn't even hear much about it, and then Netflix was like, you should watch this. And I'm very, very glad I did. It was fantastic entertainment. So Uncorked on Netflix.
Uncorked.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
We'll give you the review after tonight.
Okay.
Thanks for joining
good.
us. We're so glad that you are well, and Reggie's
You
well,
too.
and that you guys together are doing well. Those first 6 months, that first year of marriage,
Those are tough.
Yeah.
that was. I'm surprised we are still together after that first year. That was a tough one, and to do
We're
that
gonna make it.
in quarantine, I can only imagine. So
It's been
we wish
very
you all the
funny.
best.
We've been doing these mini segments on our Instagram stories called Newlywed in Quarantine, just for people to see that it is like okay to be weird and strange and funny and just trying to make your own entertainment during this time. So yeah.
We have to.
Indeed.
Well, good to
So
see you.
Yeah,
guys.
so good to see you.
Adios.
Bye.
Wow. Bye-bye. That is one of the best ways to spend a half hour, and one of the best uses of this medium is to connect people who might not have already known about Brittany with her genius and her wisdom and her insight on what's going on in this country. Yeah. If you're not already following her on Twitter or Instagram, she just gave you a preview of some of what she's sharing on Instagram. Please do so. It's well worth your time, and I guarantee you it's going to open your eyes to some things that you may not have known about. And she engages with those who follow with her. So it's always a conversation. It's always a dialogue. She's always willing to learn. One of my favorite human beings on planet Earth. And so, Brittany, thank you for being here. We have one more quick surprise guest. Amy, do you have another 5 minutes?
Yes.
Do you know that podcast I like to listen to in our time with Melvin Bragg?
That makes me fall asleep.
Yeah, Amy doesn't like it, and it's
not that I don't like it. It's just like it just lulls me to sleep.
Well, at the end of the podcast, he's interviewed all these like subject matter experts on the Industrial Revolution or photons or just he'll pick a topic and they'll just
go deep.
They'll go deep, and then at the end, the producer comes on and says, "And now for some bonus material from Melvin and his friends," and you get to hear like an unguarded conversation. So I thought we'd bring in Mike Stevens of the Moxie. Oops, that's the rock wall in my basement. Let's see if we can. Here we go. Mike Stevens for some bonus material.
Cool.
And let's find out what he's watching, get his take, hear how his family's doing.
Did you already report to everyone about the fungus movie?
No, that might be something for us to start with. Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Sorry, guys, my power. I was so busy watching her that I was like, low power alert.
Hey, speaking of which, isn't she amazing?
Yeah, no, it's so fun. It was so fun. Yeah, obviously I saw her in Austin on that bit, and I've followed her since then. But so impressive and insightful. It was really fun to see her.
We're gonna juice up too. Hold on.
I'm plugging in my phone. There we go. Now we've got power. For those who don't know, Mike Stevens is the proprietor of the Moxie Cinema in Springfield, Missouri. Mike, your orientation is, there we go.
Sorry.
And has periodically provided movie picks for us. And also I want to tell people this, you were our best man at our wedding. You're in part responsible for this union. You helped to facilitate it. And
I have this great picture of Beto like in his tux trying to run away, and you've got him by the tail of his tux, keeping him there to make sure he goes through with it.
Yes.
Yes. Right. I was there for you.
Wedding jitters. Everybody's got them. and you realize you've got about 30 seconds to make a break for it, or else it's it's life.
That was going to be a long run.
It turned out to work. So you gave us a recommendation last week. We subscribed to the Moxie Cinemas newsletter, and it was Fantastic Fungi.
Yeah.
And
sorry, I mean, like, I'm glad that Ulysses. I mean, I think it expanded his mind, but
well, so first of all, really good documentary, and we highly recommend it. And it really just kind of takes you through fungus and their role in the world. But there is a section on magic mushrooms and psychedelic mushrooms, and really made an impression on one of our kids.
Yeah, Willie endorsed that movie.
It definitely gave me a new appreciation for mushrooms, but we had to have a very serious conversation after Ulysses said, well, that sounds...
Yeah, we probably shouldn't disclose his name.
Whatever. We only have two kids, two boys.
Right.
I think I already did, sorry. I watched it with my daughter, my 11-year-old, and my 6-year-old, both of them, and in the theater, and they were less compelled by the magic one, but just in general, just fascinated by the natural world and kind of how amazing it is, and weirdly an optimistic documentary. You know, like, I feel like usually environmental docs are kind of scary, and rightfully so, but this one had this kind of, which is why it's been so successful, is people usually like to hear about kind of an optimistic take on things, and this movie does that in spades for sure.
Yeah, there's a section or a scene where I think it was during the BP oil spill, and they have 3 kind of fouled parts of the beach that are covered in oil, and they try 3 different methods of cleaning up the oil, and one of them is to release a bunch of mushroom spores on the oil and then cover it up, and it ends up cleaning up the oil, and life begins anew where life had been destroyed. And so that was one of those optimistic moments. So tell us what you're watching and what you might recommend. Serious question. So we just asked Brittany.
Yeah,
we were hoping
she stole my thunder.
Were you going to recommend Uncorked as well?
No, although it's great. I'm glad she did. But just like, you know, I thought there was a clear delineation of expertise. She was, you know, like, she had like kind of insight in politics and society, and I was for, you know, lighter.
She didn't know that you were going to be on. And Amy didn't know either. So Amy asked the question.
I'm a rule breaker, Mike. I mean,
you know, Amy.
There's one thing I've learned. Actually, I would like to say quickly, one of my favorite parts of that whole interview was just her talking about you guys. That was very sweet.
Well, it's totally mutual.
Yeah,
she's amazing.
We are big fans of hers, and we're big fans of yours, Mike. It's true. It's true.
Okay, so one thing I would like to quickly say about streaming, because it's Labor Day, and I was going to go for some Amazon picks, but opted instead, because of it being labor kind of movement, that Hoopla is a streaming site that a lot of libraries subscribe to. So if you have a library card in most of the United States, you might have Hoopla titles available. So if you go to hoopla.com, and then they'll ask for your local library, and if they do subscribe, you can get a card. And so some of the picks on Hoopla would. Have you guys ever seen a movie called Four Lions?
No. What is that? From
2014. It's a British satire, whip smart kind of satire of all things terrorism. It's like 5 buffoons trying to kind of create some kind of chaos in the UK, and I could not have laughed harder. I mean, like,
really,
the most unlikely of premises.
Okay, we're writing that down.
Four Lions.
Sorry, and Mike, is that family movie, or is that like...
No, that is not a family movie. No, that is R. That is a hard R.
Okay.
For family movies, I think... I didn't bring any family movies this time.
That's okay. We can always have our memories of Fantastic Fungi.
Right. And also on Hoopla, there's a movie called What We Do in the Shadows from 2014, which is the
New Zealand guys.
Yeah, Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi, so that is the vampire spoof, like a kind of mockumentary. And we also Eat, Drink, Man, Woman is the final one. It's Taiwanese. That's like a film from Taiwan that is a comedy about a chef who has 3 daughters, kind of discovering men, and so it's tons of great food shots. And like if you love eating and you love going out to eat and cooking, as well as laughing, that's a good pick. All of these are pretty lighthearted.
Can we run a scenario by you and get your parenting advice and also your cinematography or your cinephile advice? So
Cineast?
Your cineast advice. So this may or may not happen in your family, but when we're going to watch a movie, it's just a free-for-all wrestling match of like nobody can agree and there's tears and people storm off, and I'm not going to watch that. We decided, when I say I decided to do a ranked choice voting where you would pick your first favorite, your second favorite, and your third, and we all shook hands ahead of time and agreed that whoever wins, I don't care if it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever, that's going to be our nominee and we're going to get behind them. So these were the movies: The King, The Decline, Train to Busan, which is a South Korean zombie thriller.
Which Molly couldn't even watch the trailer.
Yeah, the trailer is like...
Which is a really good film, but like that is not a family film for sure.
Okay, so The King, The Decline, Trail to Busan, Hail Caesar, The Hateful Eight, Mud, by Tex and Jeff Nichols. Or Arkansas, from Arkansas now, Texas.
It's in Texas now, right?
And then Haywire, which you had told me about. So I just want you to guess, what movie do you think won out of The King, The Decline, Train to Busan, Hail Caesar, The Hateful Eight, Mud, and Haywire?
The Hateful Eight?
No, I think The Hateful Eight came in like 3rd or 4th. Hail Caesar, which really surprised me.
Really?
And so we watched Hail Caesar, and I think I was the only one left standing by the end of the movie. Amy had passed out 13 minutes in. Henry maybe couldn't understand it. Molly and Ulysses were bored, but they had made the pledge to be in for the end. It was a pretty good film. It was entertaining, but it wasn't. It was no Train to Busan. In other words.
Well, yeah, Train to Busan would be very intense watch right now. I think they have a new one coming out, sequel.
Airplane to Busan.
Yeah, that's right.
And then tell us a little bit about what you guys are up to and how you all are right now. How are your kids? You're in week 5, I think, or 6 of quarantine and distance learning, and how are you guys doing? And how's Springfield?
Similar thing to you on the homeschooling for the, maybe not the gifted, but we're school for the
totally gifted.
School for the loved. And Saskia is like our oldest daughter is totally taking care of herself and abiding by my math offerings, my math tutoring. Occasionally, and then Fiona's the more like we're focusing more of our attention on our youngest daughter, kind of trying to keep her on track to be able to read in 1st grade, like because she's just getting out of kindergarten, and so when she gets to 1st grade, I think she's doing 1st grade math. We're doing 1st grade math, and I think we'll be in a pretty good place. I mean, like we're doing shockingly good, because back to what Brittany was saying, like we're in a pretty privileged position that we can we have a lot of slack in our system that we can. I can work from home largely, and I still have a job, and so lucky. I feel lucky.
Does she video call in with her class?
Yeah,
Is
it
every
morning.
Completely comical?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's how it is for Henry. I mean, his teacher has so much patience.
They're like, you need to turn your mic on.
Mute it.
It's really funny. And then one time the teacher asked one of the kids, "Are you paying attention?"
And he was like, "Meh, a little bit."
They're just like,
there seems to be they're very transparent in a way I was surprised by. The kids are just like, eh.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So in Texas, movie theaters are allowed to open today. I won't ask you if that's smart or not, but when you reopen your movie theater, I'm assuming you guys haven't reopened. What precautions are you going to take? Is it every other seat, every other 2 seats? Have you thought that far ahead?
Yeah. So we're in Missouri, and we have our governor announced that May 4th would be open for business, and our local officials made kind of more restrictive measures as they are allowed to, and I'm really glad they did, because it gives us time to figure out how to do something that's very challenging. And I imagine we will open at 25% capacity. So that would be like, if we have a theater with 84 people, there would be 20 people in that theater, and every other row would be off limits or removed. And we would stagger screenings in a way that would not allow people to be in the lobby. Staff would have masks. We would, there's all sorts of things we're considering. We're kind of building out protocols and processes, and then we're going to talk to our local officials and see what they think would be best practices. And they've been totally supportive, and that's been great to have.
Last thing, Mike, Jack is asking for a speed round of questions. So just brief answers. Cargo shorts, cool or not?
Yeah, not a fan.
Okay. Better to be in the wedding or at the wedding?
Oh, it's the same difference. I mean, like, it was fun.
That was a really fun wedding.
Yeah.
Your wedding and our wedding. Let me see. Jack had some more. Jack's getting some shade from Diego on asking for the speed round. Mike,
I would say that I was looking back, and I thought Miss America, I misunderstood as a question about the Taylor Swift, but it's the Phyllis Schlafly TV series from last time we met, and I have not seen that, but it's very well reviewed. And
Jack asked Mike, will you grow your hair out during quarantine and ever get to the place where you could put it up in a bun or tie it back?
You might be close.
Your hair is
not intentional. Right, yeah, I definitely would have cut it already.
Yeah. But, okay. So, folks, you have 2 minutes to just put any question for Mike. So they'll also take a Taylor Swift review. Mud. Yeah, I've heard Mud is, and I'm embarrassed to say I've not seen Mud.
Oh,
yet.
it's so
I've seen
good.
A bunch of other Nichols films, and Mud is one I want to watch with my kids.
So he has a new movie that he's going to do. They just announced that Adam Driver is going to be in Jeff Nichols' new movie. So that's exciting.
What's the new movie about?
I have no idea. I just it's very little information. I think somebody you might be able to tell you. But.
Favorite movie of all time? HP Rend asks.
I love Chinatown. That's my generic answer to that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Emily wants to know what your skincare routine is.
Somebody's standing cargo shorts.
Who's your favorite actor?
Oh God. I mean, I've probably seen a lot. I mean, back to Chinatown, Jack Nicholson, but Adam Driver, as far as a contemporary actor, is so fun to see. Like Marriage Story was brutal, but it was also so. I mean, he's such a kind of, not a joy, but like, it's just amazing to see what he can do on screen.
So I'm going to ask Amy. Emily's really interested in what skincare products you use. You want to hit really quickly?
Sure. I use the peach scrub stuff in the shower. And then I use CeraVe night cream. And then my splurge is this like vitamin C citrus serum from Beauty Counter, which is a really awesome clean product company. What are you looking for?
Oh, I thought one of our kids came in.
That was I know what I'm going to be shopping for when I can go shop.
When you can leave the house again.
Give me some of them peach scrubs.
Yeah. No, you should go with the serum, Mike. It'll do you wonders.
Thank you.
Marilyn,
I won't take that the wrong way.
I don't use any skincare products, nor does Mike, I bet. This is just...
I mean, I use toothpaste.
Me too. I do that twice a day. Well, it's good to see you, Mike.
You're one ahead of me.
I like doing this almost just as an excuse to get to see you again.
Right.
Mike and I grew up in the streets of El Paso at the Don Haskins basketball camp, where we really battled for primacy and stayed friends long after. And now Mike's in Missouri. We're here in Texas, and this Instagram Live is one of the few ways we get to see each other. And thanks for providing the movie recommendations and the the opinions on cargo shorts and other biting issues.
That's what I'm here for. I mean, like, I'm here for you. I would say before I go that Criterion Channel is another option if you don't, like everybody talks about Netflix, but Criterion Channel has some fantastic art housey, like very arty stuff, but they also have movies like Harlan County, USA, which is like a documentary about labor, the labor unions and the movement that could, like, and what impact they can have. So that was one thought I had. Hoopla
was the other. Hoopla?
Harlan County, USA.
No, but the library card service.
Oh, Hoopla, yeah.
Hoopla.
I don't know if it's on Hoopla. I didn't double check. Sorry.
I'll tell you just one last thing, and you can comment or not. Up to you, your discretion. We have a little bit of a divide.
No comment.
In that I like the older movies, and I'm open to the art house stuff, and I'll watch the subtitles. Yeah. And Amy will not. I rented The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, that's very long.
Very long, and again, Amy.
I didn't fall asleep.
You didn't?
No.
Amy, you should see Logan Lucky. If you haven't seen Logan Lucky, you should see that. You guys should watch that.
Okay.
All right. No comment, Stevens. Springfield, Missouri. Moxie Cinema. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
So good to
see you,
guys.
Mike. So good to see you.
Adios. Love you.
Adios.
That was Mike. This is us. So I'm not sure when we will be Instagram living again, but we hope before too long. We take a little bit of a break, and then come back. If you have ideas on how we can improve, guests that you'd want to see, anything else that's relevant to improving the performance of this or your enjoyment of it, please get in touch with Cynthia Cano, the producer of this show. Cynthia, thank you for everything that you're doing. Christy, who's done all the graphics for the show. Elizabeth, who provides our daily update on COVID-19, and everyone else who's watching, and Jack, who's our first one on, Wesley, who's first or second, Jacqueline, all of our friends who we get to see through the comments as well. Really good to be with you all, and we hope to see you very soon. In the meantime, be safe, be well, be healthy, stay at home, and we'll get through this. Adios. Bye-bye.